A very good morning to you all. Today we are going to discuss on a very important topic in the language, which is the introduction to phonetics. Phonetics is one of the branches in the language. In fact, it is one of the branches in the linguistics, which is very, very important. And the importance to study phonetics has emerged so vividly because we would understand the pronunciation, we would understand how the pronunciation varies from a dialect, to an accent to an accent, and to a language to another language. I am Susan and I'm working in Vignyan's Institute of Engineering for Women in the Department of BSNH as an assistant professor in English. I here today take the privilege to explain to you all a topic, Introduction to Phonetics. Now let us look into the first slide. Our first slide explains us about the 26 letters we have in English and the 44 corresponding sounds we have in English. In English, as we all know, we have 26 alphabets. For 26 alphabets, we have 44 corresponding phonetic symbols, which we call it as IPA. These 26 alphabets are further classified into 5 vowels and 21 consonants. The 5 vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and the consonant letters are the rest of the alphabets. Moving on to the 44 sound classification, these 44 sounds are broadly classified into 19 vowel sounds and 25 consonant sounds. Much further, we have 6 short vowels, 6 long vowels, and 5 vowels which we call it as which we term it as diphthongs and monophthongs, and then we have 26 consonant sounds, in which 18 are classified as normal consonant sounds and 7 are classified as diaphragms. Even before looking into the linguistics or to the phonetics, let us all understand the term phonetics. Phonetics is nothing but it is the study of physical and acoustic properties of human speech sound and how they are produced, transmitted, and perceived. Phonetics, the term itself, tells you that it is the study of physical and acoustic properties of how the human produces sounds. When we say producing a sound, I am focusing it on how we produce the internal organs involved in the production, and then the transmission, how the mouth organ helps us in transmission, and how we perceive it, the acoustics, how we hear the sound. Phonetics helps us understand the variation in pronunciation between different languages, dialects, accent, and how those variations can impact communication and comprehension. For example, let us take alphabet R. The alphabet R is not stressed in British accent. However, the same alphabet R is stressed in American accent. For example, let us take a word called like car, a very simple word like car, C-A-R. When it comes to British accent, we would not stress on the R because it is followed by a vowel A. At that point of time, we would term it as car in a British accent. However, when it comes to an American accent, since we stress R's, we would say car. The C-A-R, the R is prominently sounded there. However, to avoid this kind of confusion, it is very, very important for us to understand phonetics. The International Phonetic Alphabet IPA is a system of symbols used to represent the sounds of all languages and is an important tool for phonetic analysis and transcription. As we call A, B, C, D to Z as alphabets, we term the all 44 sounds as IPA, which is an International Phonetic Alphabet. Moving on to the next slide, I would want you to just take you on a quick ride about the main characteristics of language. It is very, very important for us to understand the first point. One of the main characteristics of language is a systemic. Language is a system. Language did not just evolve for the namesake because it has emerged just like that. No, language is a system. Language is a compound of different branches, and the different branches like phonetics, phonology, morphology, lexicology, syntax, discourse analysis, and semantics come together to form language. Since we are focusing on phonetics, today we would first understand that language is systemic, and this language explains you phonetics. The next point, just to have an idea about the different kind of characteristics of language. Language is symbolic. Not just only with words and sounds we communicate, but we communicate through symbols also. Symbols like waving your hand, gestures, body language, facial expression, eye contact do definitely render a great amount of knowledge to this point, saying that language is symbolic. Moving on to the next slide, we said that language is social. Yes, of course, language is social, because without language, we will not be able to communicate, or we will not be able to prove ourselves that we are civilized. We are expressing our thoughts, we are expressing our emotions, we are expressing our opinion on a day-to-day basis, on a minute, in a second, in an hour, only by sticking ourselves to this point that language is social. The second one, language is arbitrary. Yes, of course, language is unlimited. Language is uncontrolled. We just do not have only a limited set of words or phrases to communicate. We have n number of words. We have so much of vocabulary that which we can use in daily usage to communicate to the rest of the people. Language is cultural. In fact, the humankind has a history in the sense that animals do not is entirely the result of language. We learn about the cultures of new country, our own culture, thanks to the language. Of course, language is cultural. Language is definitely cultural because it connects us to the different parts of the world and to the different parts of the people. Language is dynamic, language is changing, language is evolving, language is enduring. It is not stable, it is not stagnant, it is not to the point. It keeps on evolving. You must be wondered to see that every year there'll be some hundreds of words being introduced to the dictionary every year, which means language is not stagnant, language is evolving. Language is variation. There are more than one way of saying anything. There are more than one way of saying your gratitude. There are more than one way of apologizing. There are many other ways, because language is not, again, it is not stagnant, and it has got various other expressions and various other forms to express our opinion. Language is, of course, definitely meaningful, and language is human. Without language, the first major difference of being an animal and a human is quite vivid here. Now, moving on to this slide. Now, let us look into human language versus animal communication. If someone asks you what separates human from other animals, one of the first things that would probably come to mind is language. Language is so fundamental to human life that it is hard to imagine what life would be without it. In fact, the original term for language refers to it as a part of a body. Language is derived from the Latin word lingua, which means tongue. Language is definitely a part of human civilization. And as it says, if someone asks you the differences between an animal and a human, the first major difference that one can quote is the language. And language is derived from the Latin word lingua. The word lingua itself means tongue. And as Burnett highlights the inseparability of language from human beings when he says, verbal communication is a condition of the existence of human society. Of course, yes, this we have to agree with this statement, because if today human civilization is evolving and enduring, it's only one of the main factors is only language. Moving on to the next slide. Now let us see let us look into the branches of language, linguistics. Linguistics refers to the scientific study of language. The word linguistics is derived from the Latin word lingua. As we have already termed, lingua means tongue and istics means knowledge. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, linguistics refer to the scientific study of the structure and development of language in general or of particular languages. The study of linguistics comes from the natural curiosity of man about the particulars of the language he speaks, evaluates through different perspectives. According to Ferdinand de Saussure, one of the most famous linguistics, a linguistic system is a series of differences of sound combined with a series of differences of idea. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, we have just understood that it is a structure and development of language in general or in particular of the terms together put together as language. Now let us just look into the scope. Linguistics involve a vast, complex and systematic study with different core areas such as phonology, phonetics, morphology, syntax and semantics. It is also intertwined with various other disciplines and contains fields like psycholinguistics and social linguistics. When I mention the scope, I am saying that phonology, phonetics, morphology, syntax and semantics are intertwined with various other disciplines like social linguistics and psycholinguistics. Let's move on to the next slide to understand in detail about phonetics. Branches of linguistics. One of the important branches of linguistics is phonetics. The main reason why I wanted to mention to you all about language is because you should know where are we evolving, how it has evolved, and why are we studying phonetics as the branch of language. One of the main branches of language is linguistics, and one of the sub-branches of linguistics is phonetics. Phonetics refers to the study of the sounds of speech. It deals with the way sounds are produced, transmitted, and perceived. Phonetics definitely deals with how sounds are produced. When I say how sounds are produced, how our internal organs help us to produce a sound, and how is it transmitted from the oral speech, and how is it perceived? Acoustics, how is it perceived? The three main branches of phonetics are articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, auditory phonetics. Articulatory phonetics, it studies the articulation of speech sounds. Articulatory, how we articulate the speech sounds, the sounds that we produce. And acoustic phonetics studies the physical properties of speech sounds as transmitted between mouth and ear. How is it produced? We study it in articulatory. How is it transmitted? We study in acoustics, because we study about it by saying that how the sound is produced from mouth, the transmission, and how is it perceived through ear. And auditory phonetics, which studies the perpetual response to speech sounds as mentioned by ears, auditory nerve and brain. Something that happens externally from ears to the brain, and how is it heard, how is it understood, is what is done in the auditory phonetics. Now moving on, we have another branch of phonology. Not just that, we have all these branches as the branches of the sub-branches of linguistics. To mention mainly phonology, because we are studying about phonetics. Psycholinguistics anyhow is a sub-branch. Social linguistics also involves about how society influence us to pick up a language. Similarly, phonetics, how the sound, speech and the physical terms of sound is produced and all. Similarly, the other branches like syntax, semantics, morphology, pragmatics and comparative linguistics and all. Moving on, let us just only focus on the linguistics, in which linguistics we are focusing on phonetics. Since we are doing phonetics, it is very, very important for us to understand the organs of speech, because as I said, sound is not just produced from the mouth alone. There is so much that happens when you produce a sound, especially when you study phonetics. When you're focusing on how these 44 sounds are produced, there is so much of anatomy that happens within you, which we will be detailedly studying or focusing on while we are doing this topic. Moving on, the main topic is organs of speech. You all can see, I'm sure it is all very audible, or it is all very clear for you all to see the figure here, which mainly focuses on the organs of speech. This is the lips. These are lips. And inside you have a tongue that definitely helps you in pronunciation, but we will talk about it when we are specifically doing the vowel sounds. This is the jaw region, this is the tongue, the roof of it, the roof of the mouth, the palate, and then the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, the nose, the nasal cavity, pharynx, epiglottis, larynx, and esophagus. This we would be little concentrating on. However, a larynx is very, very important, because larynx, in other words, is also known as voice box. Larynx, in other terms, is also called as voice box. Now let us focus into the organs of speech. Moving on to my next slide. Yes. This is the main slide that I want to talk about when you talk about oral speech organs. As I have already cited to you all, that this is lips, tongue, jaw, palate, the roof of it. Here we have alveolar ridge, we have hard palate, we have soft palate too. This palate is divided into three as alveolar ridge, hard palate, soft palate. You have something called uvula here, uvula, that also helps you in producing few sounds. And we also have larynx, which is very, very important, and I already termed it is also called as sound box. This is the sound box. And pharynx and epiglottis and larynx. And this is, of course, the nasal cavity. Now let us understand how a sound is produced. For the production of speech sound, we need airstream mechanism. Understand that we need airstream mechanism for the production of a sound. How do we just pronounce a sound? How do we say a sound? Hey, he, whatever, a, e, I. How am I producing these sounds? How am I producing these sounds? I'm producing these sounds through an airstream mechanism. The air is pushed from my internal organs towards my lungs, and the lungs are pushing the air towards the upper respiratory tract, and from the upper respiratory tract to the oral cavity, and from the oral cavity to the external atmosphere. This mechanism we term it as airstream mechanism. And I further urge you to click on the next video to see the detailed explanation about the airstream mechanism and the production of vowel and consonant sounds. With here, I would like to end this topic, but to say again, the airstream mechanism helps in producing a sound. That is, there is this internal system that happens in your body. There is a diaphragm here located, above which you have bronchs, the branches from the lungs, and then there are lungs, from the lungs to the pharynx to larynx, and from the larynx to your mouth organ, the oral speech, and from the oral speech to the external atmosphere. This is how the sound is produced. However, the technique for the sound produced is called as airstream mechanism. We will further continue talking about this topic in the next class. For now, this much. Thank you guys, and this is Susan. Bye.